Thank you very much for waiting. We're going to start the second panel session. In this symposium, the theme is to establish new partnership between Japan and ASEAN, and we will look back on the broad relations and history between Japan and Southeast Asian countries, and we will discuss the roles that JICA is going to play in the next 50 years to come in strengthening the relations between Japan and the Southeast Asian region. If you're listening to English simultaneous translation, please adjust your channel to 2. First, I would like to invite Mr. Yoichi Mine, Executive Director of Research Institute for Peace and Development. The title of his speech is Southeast Asia and Japan in 2073. Mr. Mine, please. Thank you very much for your introduction. My name is Mine. I am the Executive Director of the JICA Ogata Sadako Research Institute for Peace and Development. This is my home turf. Welcome to my home turf. I hope you're going to be relaxed in enjoying this presentation. I will show you some slides and I will speak very casually. The theme is 50 years from now, 2073, what Southeast Asia will look like and what kind of relations can Japan establish with Southeast Asian countries in 2073. Today, I would like to mainly focus on the changes in demography as I make my presentation. Before talking about 2073, I would like to look back on 50 years ago. I have been studying the history of ODA in the past few years, and I did some research on the anti-Japanese movement in Southeast Asian countries, and I've read several books, and this is one of them. 50 years ago, some of the opinion leaders 50 years ago have participated in a symposium, and that symposium is summarized into this book. This anti-Japanese movement in Southeast Asia was a big shock to Japan. And reading the summary of the symposium, I thought some of their opinion may not hold true anymore nowadays, because they never discussed the feature and the characteristics of each country in Asia. Japan regards those different countries in Asia as one, but each country is different. There's diversity in each country and diversity in the people in each country. And the panelists in that symposium did not mention at all about that diversity. That was a shock to me. Now, 1977, Mr. Tanaka, the president of JICA, talked about this already, and I'll be repeating the same thing. This is Fukuda Doctrine, and Japan has came up with this doctrine in order to cope with the anti-Japanese sentiment and movement. Japan will never be a military power, and heart-to-heart relationship will be established, and Japan and ASEAN are equal partner. The key word in this Fukuda doctrine was the heart-to-heart relationship. Even now, JICA but currently JICA's slogan is "We connect the world with trust." And this 1984 and 1994 pamphlet of JICA, it's the 10th and 20th anniversary of JICA establishment. how the point is human resources development, nation building, and heart-to-heart exchange, which is the basis of Fukuda Doctrine. So it is modeled, it was modeled based on Japan-ASEAN relations, and it is being translated and developed to be a model for Japan's relationship with the world. Now I've looked back on the 50 years. Now we will look to the future, 2073. Now we have to have a viewpoint of population, demography. When we predict what's going to happen in 50 years' time, you can never predict GDP 50 years from now because economic growth is volatile, there's a lot of fluctuation. And maybe new technology will be, 50 years ago, nobody predicted AI or drones. So nobody can predict the technology 50 years from now. We cannot predict the alliance between nations to nation, but demography is something we can predict accurately, because the birth rate and death rate do not change that much, although it changes only a little bit. Now, the population people who are 51 years old from now are already born. So you can make a prediction. Unless there's a big war or a big pandemic, maybe it may change. But the population is predictable. Based on that, who is living in which country in Asian region 50 years from now? According to UN prediction forecast. Now, looking at the various regions in the world, Africa, South Asia, which is a region with growing population, and Southeast Asia and East Asia, including China and Japan. When we look at this region, this is from 73, this is 100 years until 2073, and the middle is 2023, which is now. The East Asia population is 2.5 times the population size of Southeast Asia, but 2073 it will be reduced to 1.5 times, which means in 50 years' time, the population of East Asia and Southeast Asia will be around the same size, which is about 1 billion people. Now, when we look at each country, and also we add Japan here, I think Brunei is hidden somewhere. I'm sorry, it's not there. In 1973, Japan and Indonesia had about the same size of population. But in 100 years' time, by 2073, Indonesia and Philippines will be the two major population countries. So they have a big population. Large size of population means that now everybody has PC and smartphones. And so they deposit money and they want to buy automobiles. So the fact that the population is big means there's a big demand for those products. And Japan's population decrease is modest, but Vietnam supersedes Japan in terms of population by 2073. Next, this is a birth rate region-wise. In 2030, in Southeast Asia and in South Asia, the population replacement rate is below 2. Even in Africa, the population is predicted to decline. There is no area where the population will continue to explode as education level goes up and as women start working, the birth rate will go down.
And in the long term, this will decline even in Southeast Asia. So in 2073, in all Southeast Asian countries, the birth rate will fall below 2. And therefore, in the long term, or in all countries, the population will be stabilized, and there will be no population explosion in any of those countries. And in 2073, when we look at the working age population, you can see that the birth rate is going to decline, but the working age population, the number of children, in other words, will continue to increase. So I think in the first session, Professor Oba mentioned about 3 groups in ASEAN countries, and I do agree with that view. But when we look at the demographic trends, we can have 3 groups as well here. And in around 2073, you have in almost half of ASEAN countries, Timor-Leste by the way, is included in Southeast Asian region. So Timor-Leste, Myanmar, Laos, Philippines, Indonesia, and Cambodia forms one group, which composes about 50% of the Southeast Asia, and so they will make up about 50% of the working age population within the region. About 50% to 70%. So they will continue to have a great presence in the next 50 years. But on the other hand, Japan and Thailand and Singapore will fall down. The population of youth will decline as it heads towards 2073, with Singapore, Thailand, Japan almost at the same level. And when we look at these statistics, there's another group in the middle, Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei. So when we look at the broad categories, we have mainly 3 groups. And when we look at the declining birth rate and aging populations, when we look at the population of those 65 and over, according to UN estimates, in 2073, Japan, Singapore, and Thailand makes up 40%. 4 out of 10 people will be 65 years or older. So in terms of demographics, these 3 countries are very similar. And about half, Philippines, Indonesia, Myanmar, Cambodia, Laos, Timor-Leste, will make up another group, and they will not age very much at the time of 2073. But there's another group again in the middle, Malaysia, Brunei, Vietnam, which will have their societies age around at 25%. Next slide, please. And where do people live then? Where does the population live? So this is the figure from 1950 to 2050, showing the trends of urbanization, the past and the future estimates. So in terms of urbanization rates, I went the other way around. The population in the rural areas I have plotted. And again, as education level improves, industrialization is promoted, the population in rural areas will decline, productivity will increase, and the rural population will decline. And if you look at the trends, this is quite interesting. By country, the decline in rural population, in other words, resistance to urbanization, is, for example, in Malaysia and Thailand, when we look at that, Malaysia, actually in 1950s and 1960s, the rural populations were quite substantial. But on the other hand, Thailand resisted against the move towards urbanization. Rural communities retained population. And in Indonesia, for over the long term, the rural population continues to be stable. And in Myanmar, this is due to policy. In orange, you can see large fluctuations in rural populations. And here again, this is really dependent on the policy, the political system. And overall, the rural population will continue to decline, however, overall. But the trends will be, however, different from each country by country. Next slide, please. And now changing the subject a little bit, this is the case in Japan. And this is a total fertility rate, TFR. In 2009-25, data shows on left, and 2016 shown on right. And this is quite interesting because in the world today, the country with the highest birth rate is the Niger in West Africa. And in 1925, in Hokkaido, actually the birth rate was between 6 and 6.5. This is the number of children that the woman will have in the lifetime. And this is an average statistical data defined statistically. And in 1925 in Tohoku and Hokkaido, the birth rate is similar at the same level as Niger today in West Africa. And so Japan was like Africa in 1925 before the war. But however, even at that time, in Kinki region, the birth rate is quite low, and Kyushu as well. And the high in the eastern region and low in western region was a clear trend. So Okinawa was quite low. But however, today the trend is reversed. The birth rate is high in west and low in the northern areas. Hokkaido is less than 1.2, 1.6. So in Western Japan, the birth rate tends to be higher, but Okinawa, for example, is almost closer to 2, which is a replacement rate. And why did I introduce this data? So as in Southeast Asia, when we look at these data, in Southeast Asia, for example, like in Indonesia, in the islands, of course, there are differences in cultures, but there is a demographic differences between the urban areas and the rural areas. And of course, there are differences between the northern part and the southern part. And I think this is similar with the other ASEAN countries. And for those people coming to Japan from Indonesia, for example, studying at Hokkaido University, or those studying in Kagoshima University in the south, or those who are working in fisheries in Hokkaido as a trainee, or those engaging in fisheries in the south part of Japan, even though Japan, it is the same country, Japan, but the situation is very different from northern part of Japan and the southern part of Japan. And this also applies to many Southeast Asian countries. So there is a great diversity within countries, in any countries. Very sorry for that. So I will be going to my conclusion. So when societies, when we categorize them across the world, there is countries that are rising in population and will continue to do so for several times. But about half of ASEAN countries in 2073, about 65% will maintain the working age population. Then the population will increase. They will retain a large population of youth. And in those countries, if there is investment in education, they can expect to maintain sustainability, economic growth. But however, they will need to consider environmental limitations for them to grow. There are challenges, however. There are people who are leaving rural areas. They want to work in urban areas. And are there going to be enough employment for such youth? Or maybe how can we channel youth to build rural communities. And there's also a necessity to improve intergenerational dialogue, and that will apply to about half of ASEAN countries. But on the other hand, like Japan, there are countries that the youth population is declining, and that also applies to a number of Southeast Asian countries, including Singapore. So in these countries, there'll be a declining birth rate, an aging society, and for these countries, they will have to nurture their children and at the same time respect the elderly and have dialogue with the past, which is not a bad thing. This is a mature society. And they will have an opportunity to appreciate nature. And even in Japan, in Tokyo, of course, we are perhaps going to have more space. And on the other hand, we have the patient stability in the pension system, and how are we going to maintain infrastructure, and how are we going to prevent population decline? Maybe we will need to prepare for bringing in population from outside the country. Are we going to prepare for that or not? Is going to be another question. And this is going to be my last slide. In terms of demographic structure, there are two types. One, like Japan and China, which is mature society, and the other, like India and Africa, which is growing. So in these countries, the young people are growing, but on the other hand, in Japan and China, the number of aging population is growing. So in Southeast Asia, even within the region, there is a great diversity. So in some sense, Southeast Asia represents the global trends. And for us, we need to look at the differences in those different Southeast Asian countries in how we are going to build ties with those countries. And we need to understand that there's a diversity in each of those countries. And in such situation, in such circumstances, Japan and Southeast Asia need to foster and learn the style of caring for each other. And furthermore, as ASEAN becomes more mature, there needs to be growing intergenerational, interregional, intergender dialogue and communication, or intercultural care. And each person needs to be visible in our exchange with ASEAN. And in that sense, the Fukuda doctrines, engagement heart to heart, will continue to make sense in the next 50 years and further evolve. So this is going to be my last slide, the reference material published by Iwanami Shoten. In this book, I didn't explain much about Southeast Asia, but more in the comparison between the maritime nations of ASEAN countries and Africa's continental world. We looked at the different behavioral systems and styles between the two continents. And then Mr. Araki mentioned about the Africa's involvement, and this also touches upon such relationship. And the question is, how are we going to think about Japan's contribution to the African continent is going to be one of the themes going forward, and maybe perhaps you can refer to this book. So my time is up, 20 minutes, so I would like to conclude my presentation. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Professor Mine. Now, I would like to start panel discussion. Please give us a moment until we change the setting on the stage. Thank you for waiting. Let's welcome the moderator and panelists. Let's welcome them with a big hand. So our moderator is Mr. Nakashima, Assistant Director, Southeast Asia, Division 1, South Asia and Pacific Department, JICA. Hello, everyone. I'm Nakashima from JICA, Southeast Asia and Pacific Department. I'll be the moderator for the session. So this symposium started at 1:30 this afternoon. How are you doing? You may be a bit feeling a bit tired, but anyway. The term symposium, I looked it up on dictionary. So it's from like a kind of a banquet or party in ancient Greek. So this is a kind of second party. So hopefully this is something that is entertaining or fun. And symposium. And this term was recorded by Plato in the ancient book. And this symposium was a place where the participants talked about love. So, but today we are not going to talk about love. We will talk about the future of ASEAN and Japan. And after at the end of this second session, I would like to hear from the people in the audience about what they think, or any comments that they would like to share with the rest of the audience. So, and I can see very well the faces of those who are sitting in the very back, so please don't worry. So, I hope that this will be a great intimate kind of opportunity for all of us to think about ASEAN and Japan by looking back from 2073. So, thinking of Japan 50 years later, what kind of image do you have? So you may feel a bit worried or nervous, maybe, you feel something like that. And as Professor Mina said, when we think of ASEAN in 50 years, maybe the economy will grow even further, and maybe some of the issues that we have will have been resolved. Of course, the past will not be very deep, but I think the region will have a bright future. So, ASEAN and Japan, if you think of the future of the respective region, what kind of image can we have? So, I hope all the panelists will join. And at the end of this second session, I would like to take comments from the floor as well about the theme of looking back from 2017. So I would like to introduce, I would like to ask the panelists to introduce themselves. First, Fukushima-san. One person will have about 3 minutes, please. Hello. I'm from Instalim. This is Japan's first startup to provide a 3D printed prosthetic limb. My name is Tokushima. Hello, everyone. Next page, please. So, I was involved in international cooperation, international development as the JOCV, the volunteer, and then I went to Philippines, and then I started up the digital fabrication lab with all those hardware and so on. And I was a part of the project to promote local economy using these facilities. And the Fab Lab, digital fabrication facility, and then we welcome the president of the Philippines, and then it is incorporated in the government's policy, and then we have more than 20 locations now. And I myself saw the drastically developing economic situation in the Philippines. So, excuse me. And my paper was referred to in a very high-profile report of the World Bank. And this facility project is very well known in the Philippines. And at this lab, the health, we received lots of inquiries about how they can make like affordable prosthetic limb, and it was not possible, especially in the rural areas. So I wanted to solve this issue. And then after I came back from my task in the JOCB, I started up this company, InstaLim. At my company, we use AI to make easy design of the limbs, and then we print by 3D printer the limbs. So with this technology, we can produce the prosthetic limbs at the cost 1/10 of the conventional limbs. So now many people are using our prosthetic limbs. So taking advantage of a digital manufacturing. So now we can remotely scan, we scan the leg and then send the data to a remote place for manufacturing. And we are receiving inquiries about doing this in a war place like Ukraine. And J-Start Impact, the logo you see at the bottom. This is from METI. So we were recognized or selected as one of the companies which can make a positive impact in society. That is all from me. Thank you. Next, Reronson-san, please. Okay, 1973, so 50 years ago. I was born in Hanoi. It was during the Vietnam War. And as a student, like after the Vietnam War, Vietnamese economy was sanctioned, and we were very tough situation. But then now we have Doi Moi policy. So from mid-80s, the company's economy grew. Like economy was open to the rest of the world, and we received attention from different parts of the world. And then, as a high school student, Vietnam government was saying that the country will aspire to become an industrial nation by 2020. And then I had that kind of image. So when my image of an industrial country is countries like Germany or Japan. So I studied mechanical engineering at university, and I graduated from university. It was in the 1990s, and then I had an opportunity to study outside the country. So after I graduated from college, I studied Japanese for 1 year, and then I joined the language school in Japan, and then I joined this Tokyo University of Agriculture and Technology. And then after that, I worked there for a mold, like a metal die and mold company. So that was my intention when I came to Japan. But when I was studying from 1995 to 2000, I learned many things, especially about the small and medium enterprises in Japan. So I had the opportunity to visit those companies and had exchanges with people there. And then I learned about the system to receive trainees from outside Japan. So I initially came to Japan to learn about this mold technology. And but my experience here changed the image of Japan. So Japan is a very big economic country, but the country is not supported only by large corporations, but also small and medium-sized companies. And then I think, we think that this model is needed also for my country. And in those days, there were no Vietnamese people around me. but from other South Asian countries, Malaysia, Indonesia, China, but not many Vietnamese people. And I think that in order for Vietnam to grow, we need to nurture and develop small and medium-sized companies. And then I was fortunate to be given an opportunity to study in Japan. Then why not other Vietnamese people? So I wanted more and more Vietnamese people, young people, to come to Japan and learn about the business and industry. So then I started to think about utilizing this system or the overseas trainees. Then I think it is also beneficial for the Japanese companies to operate business, expand their business in Vietnam as well. So this is mutually beneficial. And today's theme is how the relations between Japan and ASEAN will evolve into 2073. So, and I started my business in 2001, and I have come a long way, but many Vietnamese people, young people, we have assist them study Japanese language, and also I provide opportunity to learn not only language but also about the culture and communication, so that they can be successful when they come to Japan. So that is what my company does.
My company is called SHI. I hope that this company is going to last for a long time, until 2073, 50 years time. I hope this company still survives, and I hope we can be a bridge between Japan and Vietnam. Sorry for a long speech. Thank you for listening. Next, Mr. Hotta, please. Ms. Hotta, please. My name is Sakura Hotta. It's my third year in JICA, a private company alliance and international relations is something I'm working on. I am assisting companies that want to do business in Southeast Asian countries. Next page, please. My experience with Southeast Asia is shown on this slide. When I was a student, I stayed in Mindanao, which is even smaller than Awajishima Island, and I was a member of NPO, and I had a chance to stay in this small island in Mindanao. And I started up a business of teaching English remotely to Japanese elementary school students. And Filipinos are very good at English, and they're very energetic. And I thought their powerful nature was well communicated to Japanese children. And in the Philippines, there were many young women who became pregnant at early age, and they dropped out of school. And I worked with the nurses in the Philippines to help those young female dropouts. And I stayed in the Philippines for a year. And also, I carried a backpack with me and visited various Southeast Asian countries. And, each country has different culture, different religion, and that diversity really attracted me. And I was in charge of managing a share house for students. This is a share house project where students or people from different countries can stay together. Also, we had some exchange events, both online and offline, between Japanese and Southeast Asian youths, and that was during the pandemic. And I also supported explaining how to make application for these exchange programs in English. Sure, this management of share house, I had a chance to meet with exchange students and also technical trainee, intern trainees, and I really found out that there are really people from throughout the Southeast Asian countries working in Japan, and I also witnessed the problems they're facing. Now we're talking about our relations in 2073, and by that time I'll be 75 years old. And today I hope we can discuss a lot about, what we should aim for by 2073. Now, Ms. Hori, please. Hello. My name is Maya Hori from McKinsey & Company. It is a management consulting firm. I've been working here for about 20 years. And Southeast Asian countries and international development is the area that I have opportunity to take part in as an employee of McKinsey & Company. Personally, I majored in international development in university, and I wanted to work on this theme. And after I started working in McKinsey, 2 years after I entered McKinsey, I had a chance to take part in a project in the Philippines. And that project was the state-owned enterprise. The project is to turn around the management of that state-owned enterprise. And that is exactly the kind of development project that JICA is doing. And also, it also has an aspect of creating vision for the top management and how to be profitable. And to be profitable, you need to have the right operation and right marketing and increasing productivity. That's the expertise of McKinsey & Company. So it's a kind of combination of the know-how of McKinsey and JICA. And I was only 2 years into McKinsey. And I had a chance to be involved in those social problem solving, and it was very attractive to me. And I thought I can contribute to the society. Also, I had a chance to go to Indonesia and be involved in another project in Indonesia. And I was in Washington, D.C. for a long time. So I had a chance to be involved in projects for developing countries in Africa. So, in order to change the world, you need to change the human resources and change the organization. So when you support companies, how can we motivate people to work harder? From a macroeconomic point of view, those support will lead to economic growth, and also will lead to more affluent people. I came back to Japan 5 years ago, and I'm involved in 2 activities. First is this development-related work, which is my passion. I work with government agency and organizations like JICA, and how to support Southeast Asian countries like Cambodia, Laos, Indonesia, and so forth, involving private companies. And for private companies, when Japanese companies think about overseas business, Southeast Asia is really a major option. How can we seek the growth potential in Southeast Asia? And perhaps Japanese traditional organizational structure must be changed in order to be more global. And how can they, and perhaps by that reform and change, they will be more competitive in the global market. And I'm supporting the reform of those private companies. Now, so the state-owned enterprise turnaround is one of my main work, and also public health emergency, also supporting organizations to be ready for those pandemic and so forth, and also transition finance and how to achieve sustainability. These are the scope of my work. Thank you very much. I'm really looking forward to today's discussion. Thank you, Ms. Hori. Mr. Fujitani, please. My name is Fujitani from Asahi Shimbun. In 1982, I started working for the newspaper company, and so I have a long career in this newspaper business during the Showa and Heisei era. And I'm mainly in charge of international news. I was in Rome, and at that time, Yugoslavia, Slavia, and the conflicts I covered. And then I went to Jakarta. And as I was looking to the slides of Mr. Mine, I was really impressed. I really remember those sceneries, and I really feel my original starting point is Philippines and Thailand, where I stayed when I was very young. And I had some experience that really impressed me. So ODA and assistance through civil society is the area that I have expertise in.
And in February, we created a digital newspaper focusing on the support of aid to developing countries, and including articles written by journalists as well as young people. And if you're interested, please look at this site. This is open and free, and perhaps you already have experience. There is no any payment involved to look at this website. Now please go to the next slide. And as I mentioned, my starting point is in Southeast Asia. In 1983, this is the Southeast Asian Youth Ship sponsored by the government. So in the 1970s, after the anti-Japan sentiments grew, the government organized young people to get on board the same ship. And actually, Princess Kiko was actually participated in this. And you can see me in this photograph. Only 5 countries from ASEAN participated: Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, and the Philippines. And these countries, youth from these countries, we spent time together in the ship for about 2 months. And one thing I noticed is that you need to be able to speak English to communicate. And obviously in Singapore, Malaysia, and in the Philippines, they speak English fluently. Malaysia, Indonesia is compared with Japan, is much better. So I stay in touch with these Indonesian and Thai people that I met on this ship. And after that, I went to university. I went to visited minorities villages in Thailand. And after in the exchange program, I went to Philippines on the Negros Islands. So I stayed there for about 1 year. And you can see in the photograph the very beautiful beach. And the President Marcos Sr. was actually came to power. Lost power due to the People's Power movement. So we had no classes at the university. We had nothing to do. So we traveled around the Philippines. And what I learned there was quite important. And as I mentioned in the first session, when we think about Southeast Asia and each of the countries, there is a great diversity. Like, for example, in Indonesia, they speak Java, they speak other languages. Religions is also diverse. Yeah. and with the exception of Orthodox Christianity, you have all kinds of religions. And I lived in a dormitory when I was studying abroad, and outside you have people, students come from all islands across the Philippines. So this kind of diversity. So I grew up in Tokyo. Grew up in Tokyo, and for a person like me, it was very shocking to see this kind of diversity. And also flexibility was used in the first session. And I totally agree. I lived in Rome, Jakarta, and two other places. And when I was in Rome, people ask me, what did you like about Rome? And everything was actually good for me. I think every part of Rome was good. But I also answer that there are commonalities. And I ask them, what are the commonalities? So basically, the Rome, Jakarta, Bangkok, when I get lost, people come to me to help me out. And sometimes they guide me to the location I want to go to. And sometimes they mislead me to a wrong location. But they are very kind. They want to help other people. And however, they are not very, sometimes they don't take me to the destination that I want to go. So this kind of flexibility is a very attractive concept. And in addition, they have the resilience, the strengths. So in Southeast Asia, people do have the image that the South Asian people are lazy, but I don't agree. And in comparison with Japan, this kind of flexibility, I think, is going to lead to become one component of the country's strengths. So that's my last slide. And so there is how Japan needs to confront with Southeast Asian countries in Africa is one of the key points of my journalism. So there is talk about asymmetry and so on. But in 2021, after the tsunami struck, there was also another tsunami in Indonesia, and I went to Indonesia the next day, and they have not forgotten that Japan has supported them before. In Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, and they supported us when there was a great Japan earthquake, and many Japanese people don't know about that. So this is a part of asymmetry as well. And this is some of the newspaper articles from the past. The print is very small. And this word Asia, maybe we can consider as neighbors, partners, and other expressions are used, but sometimes I wonder if that is really accurate in my journalism and reporting. So this is my personal comment and the personal view. So maybe there will be occasions to be able to discuss about these comments and views in this panel discussion. Thank you very much, Mr. Fujitani. And now, after we have had the self-introduction, I think there is a very diverse approaches in the ways that each of the panelists involved with ASEAN countries, some from business, some from journalism, some from other standpoints, and they have had different types of interactions with Southeast Asian countries. And now I'd like to go into the main topic, which is the relationship between ASEAN and Japan 50 years from now, in terms of forecasting and backcasting. So from how are we going to see the future for 50 years from now? Or can we do backcasting from the 50 years on to see how the present looks like? So we want to listen to the panelists about their personal views, personal experiences with regard to this question. And lastly, we would like to look back from 2073. So after we have considered the 50 years from now, what do we need to do today and in order to achieve the desired goals for the future? So we would like to take about 20 minutes for each of the sessions. And in this discussion, I was instructed by my supervisor to make it live. So I have not told the panelists which order they will be speaking in, so they may be nervous. But I would like to ask Ms. Hori to speak first about the 50 years of ASEAN and Japan's relationship. So both from the forecasting and backcasting point of view, including the forecasting of future GDPs of these respective regions and countries. Thank you very much for asking me that question. So when I was first asked of this question, I felt intuitively that in terms of forecasting, Japan is not growing economically. On the other hand, ASEAN is very strong. They have great momentum, and there are also issues related to COVID, but they have a great momentum. But when we look at the data, as some of you may have already known, as mentioned by Mr. Mine just now about the demographic changes, when we think about that, like for example, in 2073, Japan's GDP will not be in the top 10 around the world. So that is my understanding. Maybe 12th or 13th will be Japan's position. But on the other hand, Indonesia probably, when we think not only about the population growth, but there will be a per capita growth. So there will be China, India, and Indonesia will probably become fourth in terms of GDP. And when we think about ASEAN as a whole, it will go beyond EU as a fourth largest economic bloc. So Indonesia will double Japan's GDP, and ASEAN as a whole will be 3 or 4 times as large as Japan's economy. So I think that will be 2073. And at the moment, Japan is 3 times large economically today, but this is going to reverse in the 50 years from now, is my personal forecast. So as a Japanese, this is quite hard to imagine as a Japanese person, but this, I think in the next 50 years, this kind of substantial change is possible. And when we think about that personally, I think, for example, Japan has a manufacturing basis in the ASEAN countries. This is the current dynamics, but Japan in the future will change with respect to markets, the human resources. Japan will increasingly need to learn and benefit from Southeast Asia, to have a partnership with Southeast Asian countries. So I think this whole system is going to change. And especially, ideally speaking, in terms of backcasting, I think that there should be 2 points that we can learn from. The one is the technology and innovation, and the ASEAN countries take risks differently. So the number of unicorns at the moment, ASEAN has about 40, but Japan only 12. So when we think about the future, I think in many ways there will be more innovation in Southeast Asia. And the question is, how are we going to use new technology in ways to create new business models? So Japan has many things to learn from Southeast Asia. So that is one point.
In many ways, inequality, inequity, there will be bigger gaps. And then we will see even more of that in ASEAN. Then how to see these as social issues and solve them, that is another challenge. Maybe there is a good amount of opportunities for ASEAN to think about the things with Japan. Each side, so Japan has accumulated lots of experiences and knowledge, so I hope that Japan can keep having great relationship with ASEAN. Thank you very much, Ms. Hori. Very insightful comment. And as we heard from in the first session, panel session, older people see the relationship between the 2 regions differently from younger people. Yes, those changes have already been seen. I think Japan can learn new business models from ASEAN countries. So, and new business model. So, we have one person, Tokushima-san. Tokushima-san is the one who created new business model. So next I would like to ask Tokushima-san about how he sees the two regions in 50 years. Thank you. Earlier, Nakashima-san said that we are not going to talk about love in the session, but I really would like to talk about love because in Salem family, we have in the Philippines. Philippines has a big office. We have about 50 members there, and then everyone is working with love for each other. Anyway, maybe I have different sense from the rest of the panel, maybe. Yeah, many people in the panel discussions say like Japan is more advanced or Japan is still showing presence and Japan's technologies are provided to our partners in Southeast Asia. But it's not the case, at least where I am working. So it is very equal or fair. We are a technology startup, and we have many engineers, but the Filipino engineers, there are things that the Filipino engineers are better than Japan. Maybe hardware, Japanese engineers are better than Filipino engineers, but software, Vietnamese engineers are excellent in software, and Filipino engineers, so they are very advanced in customer service, customer support. So different, strengths. So fair relationship building is already here, at least where I am working. And at the forefront of the startup, that's what is happening in the forefront of startups. And according to forecast, I think there will be more and more cases like this. And as you know, it will be more equitable and fair and horizontal relationships will be made. Many forecasts say that, and that is really happening. So when we think about 50 years, in 50 years, maybe it's easier to imagine that this will more of the case than today.
はい、ありがとうございます。
Thank you.
はい、非常にもうなんていうんですかね、実際にフィリピンでのビジネスをされているご経験から。
So based on your experience in doing business in the Philippines, so you, from the viewpoint of people and technology, shifts are already happening. Right? And yeah, I think this is a very unique viewpoint of Tokushima-san. And we look at the ASEAN and ASEAN will look at Japan. I want to ask Mr. Leronson, to offer your comments based on your experience or your perspective about Japan and ASEAN in 50 years. Thank you. Maybe I take a slightly different angle. So the world is shrinking, the globe is shrinking. So when we think about 50 years later, so, maybe, yeah, 1,000 years ago. So maybe we can, from 1,000 years ago to 100 years ago, and to 10 years ago, like in the past 10 years. Yeah, so I think ASEAN countries in Japan, we will live like a family. So I scaled down my perspective. So Japan and ASEAN in 50 years, maybe my image is over the past 1,000 years, Japan has built a top-level economy and presence and so on. So, and JICA has operated for the past 50 years, and as a result in Southeast Asia, and they cooperated with us in infrastructure development and also education. So if we see these two regions as a big family, maybe Japan is an older brother already grown up. His big brother, who's already been grown up, and Vietnam and other countries in ASEAN. So they are younger brothers or younger sisters in the family. They are still young, and they have lots of potential for the future. So Japan will be like a bigger brother in the family, I would say. And going forward, we have developed very rich contents, culture and technology and economy. And then when we look at population, it will decline, definitely. But Japan and East Asia, Southeast Asia, so it's like a big family. By becoming a big family, maybe we can, the third point. So, excuse me, I would like to refer to your third question later based on what I have shared. So, what will ASEAN and Japan be like in 50 years? So, I'm sure that this region will prosper. Vietnam is a young country, and they have a hungry spirit, or they are eager to learn, they are eager to grow, but they don't know really as to where they can learn. And then over the past 30 years, I learned a lot by living in Japan, and I'm very fortunate that I was able to be given the opportunity to learn in an excellent environment. In order to provide opportunity for the people in South Asia to learn, grow more, then I think the Japanese language, education, that is the key. We have technology to help us communicate in different languages. A language can be just a tool. We need something more, which is heart. This is heart-to-heart kind of a relationship. So, when you are in Japan, it's better that you speak Japanese. So, because it's not just language, but if you can understand the Japanese language, you can also understand Japanese culture. And the heart-to-heart relationship, it can be achieved through that. So we'll start English, Russian, Chinese, and Korean. I will study those languages, but so 10 million. So my aspiration is to make 10 million people in Vietnam understand Japanese. It's 1/10 of the total population. That's my aspiration. So, if 10 million Vietnamese people have some contact point in Japan, that will make our countries much richer, economically and also culturally. So that is my comment about Japan and ASEAN in 50 years. Thank you. So you have worked together with Vietnamese people and younger generations. And I love your message, very strong, powerful, and warm message. Thank you very much. So maybe you are anticipating that next person to speak. This is not just about language or economy, but this is a personal interaction, heart to heart. So living together and feel comfortable living together. Or if someone has a problem, how you can help them or assist them. I think next, sorry, Hotta-san, I would like to ask Ms. Hotta to speak about this topic.
As Mr. Mine mentioned earlier, 2073, when we consider Japan, the population is 87 million, and 10% is going to be foreigners. That is the prediction forecast of the Ministry of Health and Welfare, and I was surprised to hear that. And that I think most of that 10% of population will from Southeast Asia. So I think the exchange between Japan and Southeast Asia is going to be even more active. And Mr. Lelonson said that many Vietnamese are really aspirational of Japan, and if it's true, I will be very happy, but I really wonder if it's really true. Japan must be a country in the future to be chosen by foreign countries, as Mr. Oba mentioned. You see, there are many other countries in the world, and why people from ASEAN will choose to come to Japan. As I managed share house, and I had an experience of living together with people from Southeast Asia. And in major cities, there are centers that support foreigners, but those centers cannot deal with all the problems of foreigners who are living in Japan. And there are people really feeling very lonely. So, of course, they have community in the company they're working for, but outside the company, I think they need a place where they belong to, where they can have exchange with the local people. So, as by 2073, 1/10 of Japan's population will be foreigners. So we should regard them as our neighbors, people living together with us, maybe joining festivals together, experience various life events like childbirth and so forth. By 2073, I hope the future is going to be a more inclusive one. Yeah, I think our generation will create that kind of comprehensive and inclusive community. Now, 40 years ago, you were on the vessel, and 40 years ago, maybe you were looking at the future as you were on that vessel. Mr. Fujitani, what did you think? Well, when I look at the topic of this discussion, because I knew 40 years ago, I thought it's going to be a piece of cake for me, but it's not. Now, one of Mr. Hori said that in 2073, she's going to be 75 years old, and I was shocked to hear that. By 2073, I am no longer alive. In the past, when I was living in the Philippines, I was working in a university, and there was not much communication method. Like telephone was not really good, and I saw some radio or TV broadcasting on TV, and I heard and I learned for the first time that President Marcos left Malacanang and left for the US after being expelled from the government. So the difference is this amount of information you have access to now. That's the biggest difference between 40 years ago and now. Now, there is some division in the society. You may have heard this, but you listen only to the information you like to hear. So that will lead to those fake information, and the society is becoming more and more divided. Professor Yamaguchi, who is a professor of International University, he told me that it's similar to an industrial revolution. Now this is an information-related revolution. In the case of industrial revolution, people talked about pollution and so forth, but pollution was resolved by technology. And now we are really at the starting point of this information society, and perhaps various problems will be resolved by using technology. So 50 years from now, things may not be that bad. Earlier, there was some discussion about ASEAN wisdom and knowledge. There were some totalitarian countries and some were socialist company, and Myanmar reversed the road. But most of the countries are leading the path towards democracy. So they have not withdrawn from this direction. And I have a chance to go to Jakarta once or twice a year. And I really thought visiting those countries in Southeast Asia that technology is really helping resolve those problems. In the case of Thailand, those Grab, share ride services and those new platforms are emerging. And setting aside the fact who is providing those technology, at any rate, those social problems are being solved by these new technology. And Japan should learn from them. Japan is now finally starting to introduce ride-share services, and some taxi companies are resisting that. So how to resolve the problem? In solving those problems, maybe Japan should learn from Southeast Asian countries. And perhaps we will learn from Southeast Asian countries and also neighboring countries like China and South Korea. Mr. Fujitani, thank you very much. Now, we've finished covering the second topic. The third topic is Vision for 2073. We have limited time, so maybe 1 minute for each one of you, one message per one person. What should we do now? What are we seeing? From your viewpoint, what is your opinion about this topic of Vision for 2073? And after this comments, we're going to receive questions from the floor as well. Now, Tokushima-san, please. Thank you. Listening to your comments, they were really full of insights. In the first session, there was the phase for infrastructure building is almost over, and now there's a new phase where a new type of cooperation, like people-to-people exchange, is necessary. This people-to-people relationship, should be perhaps horizontal and something related to entrepreneurship. And in this session, maybe we will be building it in a issue-resolving way. And my company is really implementing this issue-solving. In Southeast Asia, well, Japan included, there are many entrepreneurs who are trying to resolve various issues, and I'm one of them. And in the past, development assistance were so-called long tail. That is the 80% of the society. That's a majority. So the point I'm making is, this is a marketing jargon. 80% of the sales comes from 20% of products. So in international development, majority of the problems are being converged into the 20% of the total. So the 80% of the problem, the infrastructure, has been already resolved. And it was the first phase, and the ODA has resolved those infrastructure development problem. And the remaining 80% of the problem, the remaining problem may not be that big, but they are of various complicated problems of various causes, and we need to resolve that. And we, private sector, entrepreneurs and startups, must try to deal with those problems.
This is already happening, is my feeling. So 50 years from now, this kind of private sector, people-to-people collaboration to solve problems is going to be ideal and should be accelerated further. And we should have this kind of horizontal cooperation where we work together between ASEAN and Japan to achieve a more brighter future for everyone. And I think that I will be one of the implementers of these actions, is my belief. Thank you very much. Yes, we have complex and different issues that we need to address, and I think that is where the focus should be. And when we think about ASEAN, we have a huge diversity there, and even within each country, depending on the region, there are differences. So we need to look at these differences and diversity closely to better understand the situation in each area. And next, I'd like to ask Ms. Hori to speak. Thank you very much. So, listening to Mr. Say the previous panelists say that the people's people engagement is important, and I work in a large company, and I work with large Japanese corporations, and when organizations try to copy other organizations, it is not very effective. But it is more effective when individuals find what they really want to do, to really take on the new challenges and to try new things. This kind of individual thoughts, when they are accumulated, is going to make a big change. And so, as I mentioned earlier, the Japan has something really valuable, and it is not that Japan is going to sort of offer assistance to third countries anymore, and this is more towards a collaborations and taking on new challenges together with Southeast Asian countries, and that is something that we need to do as we try to move forward. And even in Southeast Asian countries, we need to create that kind of environment. Thank you very much. Next, I would like to ask Mr. Fujitani to comment. So I think the two panelists that have spoken has really spoken it all. So Southeast Asia countries, 10 countries within the region, or maybe 11. And when we think about Southeast Asia, they are not looking only at Japan. They're looking at US and other Europe and other regions. And so there is a lot of commotion is around the world. And we shouldn't ask South Asian countries to look only at Japan. And in the world of aid, there is always a confrontation or competition with China, and this still remains the case. And I think this is unnecessary. Maybe it is necessary in the diplomatic sense, but the essence is really the heart-to-heart encounter, the individual-to-individual engagement. I think that viewpoint is necessary. So what I want to say is this whole Asian region, maybe including Afghanistan, and especially China and Korea, if the relationship improves, then our relations with Southeast Asian countries will also improve. And what we need to remember, when I went to Indonesia, the Prime Minister Koizumi was there, and he visited the Yasukuni Shrine, and he built a platform for engagement with ASEAN. So it is not only about Japan's relationship with ASEAN countries, but also with other neighboring countries is something that we should be reminded of. Thank you very much, Mr. Fujitani. So next, I'd like to ask Ms. Hota to comment. Thank you very much. So listening to the three other panelists, I really totally agree with them. And lastly, if I were to comment, so the reason I joined JICA is because I wanted to support developing countries. But this era of supporting developing countries, I think, is coming to an end. And geographically, we focus on Southeast Asian countries, and we, however, will need to think about, not about assisting, but rather within the framework of the changing world and interactions with individuals, we need to work together in how we tackle different challenges in the region. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So I also work in a JICA, and I'm also a young employee. Like Ms. Atar, I think I sympathize. I have similar views with her as well. And lastly, I would like to ask Mr. Delonson. So I would like to share with you. So for myself, in the next 50 years, and working towards 2073, Japan became a major power, not as a coincidence. You were able to I think there is a basis upon which they were able to grow. And I think that what I learned from Japan was the bonsai technology. And Ise Shrine was designed 1,700 years ago. And this kind of thing is still maintained, is still standing. And in Japan, there are about 3.4 million SMEs. And Japanese companies not only have high level of technology, but it also has the heart, has the culture. So, for example, the spirit of omotenashi, hospitality, the idea of maintaining things after they have manufactured something. So this is a country that can preserve the product that they have manufactured, and they have companies and they have people within the companies. And as we work towards 2073, as a challenge, I think Japan will continue to be the elder brother in the family, a mature brother, and Japan will lead other Southeast Asian countries, that is a brother and younger sisters, that Japan can continue to teach. For example, in terms of corporate development, for Southeast Asia to expand, they need to learn, they need to be able to use their resources so that the companies within the Southeast Asia region can grow, and that will lead to growing employment. And Japan should exercise this continue to exercise this kind of leadership in Southeast Asia, including in Vietnam, so that we can together build the community. And within that, of course, we need to have Japanese language education. Of course, English is important, but we want to have more young people, more business people who understands about Japanese language and culture. And that will then again lead to further development of this region. And I would like to ask JICA to continue in the next 50 years to promote such collaborations. And we actually became the first company in our country. So we want to further promote education within our country and the region, and like to ask JICA for your cooperation and support.
はい、お時間を過ぎてしまいましたけれども。
Thank you very much. We have passed the scheduled time, but with this, I would like to close the second panel session. Thank you very much for staying with us, and we have closing remarks, but with this, I would like to close the second panel session. Thank you very much, the panelists.
Finally, Senior Vice President of JICA, Mr. Hataeda, is going to give the closing remarks in English.
Mr. Mikio Hataeda, Senior Vice President of JICA, to give us the closing remarks.
Thank you very much for attending a more than 4-hour-long symposium today. The message from Dr. Kao, Secretary General of ASEAN, and the lecture by Dr. Tanaka, President of JICA, gave an overview of the history of friendship between Japan and ASEAN, as well as changing global environment and challenges we face in Japan and ASEAN countries. In his speech, Professor Mine of the JICA Ogata Research Institute visualized the situation that would surround Japan and ASEAN 50 years later, based on the latest population forecast in the long run. Based on these speeches, we heard valuable and stimulating panel discussions. I thank Professor Ono of GRIPS, who well organized the discussion points and guided fruitful discussions. I also thank Mr. Araki, Executive Editor of the International Development Journal, who contributed to the discussion with his abundant experience and knowledge. I cannot thank all the panelists enough for their contributions. Professor Oba, Professor Sato, Professor Siripon, Executive Director Damri on the first panel, and Mr. Fujitani, Ms. Hori, Mr. Lulonson, and Mr. Tokushima on the second panel. Though I cannot elaborate on them one by one, they provided many enlightening insights and precious comments. I also thank Mr. Nakashima and Ms. Hotta, who took part representing young practitioners of JICA. Most participants conveyed the message that not only challenges, but great opportunities for a bright, dynamic future await Japan and ASEAN. I hope this symposium will lead to the deepening of diverse, wide-ranging people-to-people equal partnerships and cooperations between the people of Japan and ASEAN for the next 50 years and beyond. Thank you very much. どうもありがとうございました。
Thank you very much. This concludes today's symposium. Thank you very much for attending the symposium until the very end.